One day while we were sitting around, I asked my niece to draw her imaginary friend, Serena. She's 4 years old, and when she sleeps over, she and Serena play in the living room. She says Serena likes my house. I shudder to imagine what would happen if she didn't like my house. My daughter had an imaginary friend named Sally. She once told me about how Sally was in jail for chopping her mom's head off. Finally, you exclaim. The weekend was finally here. It had been a long week, and you really need this reprieve to maintain your sanity. You're off the highway, and just 10 miles of back road separates you from a long nap on the couch with your wife. The speed limit is 35 here, but you pull up behind a red truck going well under. Frustrated to say the least, you give him 2 quick honks to let him know you're there. Suddenly, his left turn indicator turns on, and he's onto a new road. You feel a little bad having honked at someone probably just looking for the right road, but you let it go quickly. You don't need anything stressing you out right now. You make it a couple more miles down the road until you need to turn on your headlights. It was getting darker earlier now, and the canopy of trees didn't help the illumination. You haven't seen a single car pass you on the road, so you start to admire the turning foliage. You almost didn't see that car in front of you as you approach. Again, you have to slow down to below the limit. And it's another red truck. No, wait. It's the same red truck. How the shit? He must have taken a shortcut. He's still going slowly. You assume he's looking for another turn, but after a mile you get fed up. You honk again. This time his right blinker turns on, and he pulls off to the side. You go around and speed up. You watch him in the rear view mirror. He doesn't get back onto the road. Fucking weirdo. It may as well be midnight in these woods. The closer you get to home, the faster you go. Cops never watch these roads. Just 2 miles away, you come across a sharp corner at speed. Something's in the road. Shit! You yell as you slam on the brakes and nearly skid off the road. You come to a stop and look behind you. That freaking red truck again? Parked in the middle of the road. How did it beat you here? You saw it stop. You passed it. With a flash, its high beams turned on and you hear it peeling out. It's coming for you. You peel out as well. The twists and turns of the road are terrifying going 60, but he's almost touching your bumper now. You're almost to your street. It's coming up on the right. You whip your car right and watch the red truck fly by. Still, you race your car to your driveway, watching in your rear view the entire time you're pulling in. This hasn't been a great start to your weekend. Then you bump into something. Your wife never parks on this side. You look ahead. How? There it is again, the same red truck, always ahead of you, yet following you. Its driver's side door hangs wide open, and so does the front door of your house. My aunt and uncle moved into a new house. I was staying with them for a week, but I got a weird vibe about their house. I was sleeping in the attic, and around 3 a.m. I woke up to find my 6-year-old cousin standing next to me in bed. He started telling me about his imaginary friend Maury. The next day when I asked his parents about it, they told me he didn't have an imaginary friend when they lived in the previous house, and they decided to ask him about it. But he said they had no idea what they were talking about. The next night around 3 a.m. I woke up again to find my little cousin staring at me. He kept repeating over and over, "Why'd you tell? Why'd you tell? Why'd you tell?" I tried to talk to him and he started telling me about how Maury would appear in his dreams at night and eat his dinner with the family when they were at the table. I asked him how he met Maury, and he told me that Maury came to him and asked him if he could come inside him. He said, "Yeah, sure, come on in." That's when Maury started to come to his bedside every night and talk to him. The next day I told his parents, but they didn't believe me. They thought I was making it up. On my final night in the house, I was awoken by a faint thumping under my bed. At this point I was very scared, but I worked up enough courage to peek under my bed. I found my little cousin hiding under there. "I'm protecting you from Maury," he said. "He can't trust you and he needs you gone. Maury won't hurt you if I protect you." Those were the last words I heard him say. I ran faster than I ever had before and made it at least 3 blocks down the road before my aunt and uncle caught up with me and begged me to stop. They asked me what had happened, and when I told them, they didn't believe me. When we walked back up to the house and went upstairs, my cousin was in his bed, sound asleep. I left the next morning and I never went back. When I was growing up, there was a girl in my neighborhood who was very strange. All the other kids were freaked out by her. One day, she told all the kids that in the forest behind her house, there were dead, bloody people. When they heard this, all the kids freaked out and told all their parents. Their fathers had to go out and search the forest just in case. All they found were candy wrappers and empty beer bottles. After that, all the kids in the neighborhood refused to go near her, including me. A few years later, my parents divorced. On the day that moving came to take my mom's things out of the house, the girl came out of nowhere and told me that Matt didn't like that my parents were getting a divorce. I had no idea who Matt was. Even though I had stopped being friends with her, my dad was still friends with her parents. My dad told me that Matt was her imaginary friend. Her parents had told him all about the problems they were having. Matt was often too physical. They claimed that Matt could control the lights and could even make the power go out. They said Matt also knocked on doors at night. If he was ignored, the banging on the doors would start. A few years later, my dad decided that he would invite the girl and her parents over to our house. I was begging my dad not to do this, but he said it would be nice to catch up with them. When they came over that night, my dad told me to entertain the girl. I brought her up to my room and she seemed to be acting normal. She even told me how nice my room was. However, I was still creeped out by her. She just sat down in the middle of the floor when I tried to put a movie on the DVD player, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in the most deadpan voice, she said, "Matt's here." At that exact moment, the lights began to flicker on and off. I got so scared I ran out of my room, crying in fear. Her parents came running up the stairs, dragged their daughter out of my room, and took her home. For weeks afterwards, I refused to sleep in my bedroom. I haven't heard much from that family ever since then. I heard that Matt still controlled the lights, but I don't know if he's still around. To this day, whenever the lights began flickering or a bulb blows, it still freaks me out. One evening, a woman came home late from work. She put her handbag down on the kitchen table and started going through it. Then, she realized that she didn't have her cell phone with her. She couldn't remember the last time she had it. "I must have lost it on the way home," she thought to herself. She went into the hallway, picked up her home phone, and dialed the number of her cell. The phone rang for a long time, and then somebody picked it up, but they didn't say anything. "Hello?" said the woman. There was no answer, but she could hear someone breathing on the other end. "Hello, can you hear me?" she said. There was still no answer, but the breathing got heavier. "Hello, can you hear me?" the woman asked again. Then, in a low voice, the person on the other end said, "I hear you." Then they hung up. After that, the woman kept calling her cell, but nobody picked it up. Eventually, she gave up in frustration. It was late and she decided to go to bed, and she would start looking for it again in the morning. So when she went upstairs to her bedroom, she was shocked to see her cell phone sitting on the nightstand. It was on silent. Life sucks and then you die. That's always been my motto. It cheers me up when I'm feeling down. I mean, life is shit for everyone. Puts everything into perspective. Keeps me from doing myself in. I've been told that my cynicism drives people away, but I couldn't care less. I know they suffer as much as I do, and I hate being around people who are dishonest with themselves. Anyway, that's been my motto. I like saying it. People would tell me their problems, and I tried to cheer them up with, hey man, life sucks, and then you die. So try to make the most of it. But no one ever really saw it from my perspective. They thought I was being insensitive and telling them to harden the fuck up. Oh well, what are you gonna do? If they misunderstand me, that's their own problem. This is all irrelevant, however. The reason I'm talking about my motto is because I've just now learned that I was wrong. So completely wrong. It kinda sucks that it took getting hit by a car and smeared across the asphalt to learn the truth. Life sucks, and then you wait. And I've been waiting an awful long time. The disposal is clogged again. It isn't a terrible surprise. No one in the house seems to understand that it can't grind spoons to a drainable pulp. As much as I hate to do it, I roll up my sleeve and stick my hand down the disposal. At these times, I always second guess the wiring. That's normal, I suppose. We're all pretty attached to our... Is that hair? Matted up chunks of black hair are all entwined in the mechanics of the disposal. I turn my head and push deeper into the disposal until I notice a smiling 2-foot figure sitting on the counter. My daughter's realistic doll always gives me the willies. Why is it up there? I turn to look at the drain once more. It's too dark to see anything in there. I hear the sound of rustling cloth and quickly, light footsteps. I turn my head again expecting to see my daughter, but instead the doll was standing by the light switches. I can now see the patch of black hair missing from the back of its head. I look down towards the drain with the sudden realization that I need to pull my hand out now. I hear another rustle and the click of a flipped switch. When my daughter was 3, she had an imaginary friend named Kelly who lived in her closet. She said Kelly played with her and sat in a little rocking chair while she slept. 2 years later, we were watching a horror movie and my daughter said, "That looks like Kelly." "Kelly who?" I asked. "You know, Kelly," she replied. "The dead girl, the one that lived in my closet." When I was just a baby, my older sister Julia had an imaginary friend named Jessica. She said when Jessica got mad, her eyes turned green and her voice grew deeper. She was Julia's friend for a long time, but things then started getting a little weird. After a while, my parents began to believe that our house was haunted. One night, my mom was putting me to bed and I began to cry and point at the corner. My mom tried to comfort me, but I kept crying and pointing at the same corner. All of a sudden, my sister walked into the room, pointed at the corner and yelled, "Jessica, stop it! Stop it immediately! Stop it now!" I immediately stopped crying and Julia said, "Sometimes Jessica likes to put on scary masks and scare people." My mom was a little freaked out and said, "Tell Jessica if she can't play nice, she can't play here at all." Eventually, my sister Julia outgrew her imaginary friend and stopped mentioning her. A few years later, my little sister Abby began to talk. She told my mom she had a friend that no one else could see. She said her imaginary friend's eyes turned green when she was upset. My mother asked her what her imaginary friend's name was, and she replied, "Jessica." When I was 4 years old, my mom and I moved into a large colonial house that was built in the late 1800s. My mom always had a weird feeling about this house. There was a little bricked off section in the basement, and we never knew why it was there. My mother told me that soon after we moved into the house, I suddenly had an imaginary friend. One day, out of the blue, I told her that I'd been playing with a little girl named Jenny. She thought that it was just a phase and didn't pay much attention to it. I told her that Jenny wanted me to let the cat go downstairs into the basement so that she could play with it. My mother allowed me to let the cat go down there, but it never came back. That creeped her out. Then, a few days later, I told her Jenny wanted me to go down into the basement to play with her. My mother refused and told me to go upstairs to bed. I did, and when I woke up the next morning, I had deep scratches on the back of my legs. My mom decided to research the history of the house. She found an old picture of the house and the family who used to live there. She showed me the picture and asked if I recognized any of them. There were 7 little girls in the picture, and without hesitation, I pointed to one of them. The names of all the family members are written on the back. The girl that I had pointed out was named Jenny. My mother got scared because during her research she had discovered that the girl named Jenny had gone down into the basement one day and was never seen again. The family never found her and they moved shortly after that. After I identified the girl in the picture, it was all way too much for my mom to handle. We moved out of the house and found somewhere else to live. When I turned 18, my mom told me all about what had happened in that house. It still scares me to think about it. I was looking after a 5-year-old boy, and he told me that a man named Jacob, who was dressed like a lumberjack, was sitting next to me on the couch. He must have seen the look of shock on my face, and he said, "Don't worry, he doesn't have any arms." Linda had always been the apple to her father's eye. She was a beautiful 14-year-old girl with blonde, curly hair and big blue eyes. She had many friends, for she was one of the most popular girls in school. Her greatest pleasure was fashion. She was always dressed in the newest, fanciest, most expensive clothes. Just this week, her father bought her a ridiculously expensive green Italian leather jacket, which she wore always, everywhere. Her second greatest pleasure were horses. Just last month, her father bought her a ridiculously expensive, imported German dressage horse, which she bragged about to anyone who would listen. Just yesterday, Linda was out riding said horse, galloping across acres and acres of farmland. No one was going to stop her. She didn't care if her horse was trampling down crops and straw. Her daddy was always going to get her out of trouble. He always had. When her horse bolted and she fell to the ground, she didn't cry out in anger or pain, though she did hurt herself. She was hit by surprise. Never had something so unpleasant happen to her, and she wondered when someone would arrive to comfort her. Surely someone must have seen her fall. Everybody always looked at her, but not today. No one saw her vanish into those tall crops on the field. She called out, but no one answered. She realized with horror she couldn't get up, for she wasn't able to move her legs, even an inch. She lay there for what seemed like hours between tall, green crops. And when she heard the sound of farming machines approaching, she grew to hate that damn grass-green jacket. When I was a kid, we often went camping on Lake Superior in Thunder Bay. One day, when I was 6 years old, I fell off a dock and plunged into the water. I couldn't swim, but while I was underwater, I distinctly remember seeing a little girl down there who told me to just look up towards the sun and just keep kicking and I'd be fine. I swam to the surface just in time for my grandfather to grab me and pull me back onto the dock. I found out later that a little girl had drowned in that lake near the very same spot. We were watching a scary movie on TV when my nephew looked up and said, "What's George doing on the TV?" I asked him what he meant, and he said, "That boy on TV looks like George." I asked him who George was, and he replied, "He lives above my bed, and every night when the lights are off, and talks to me, but I can't really hear him." I asked him to draw me a picture. He drew a small boy with black holes for eyes and no teeth, who was bleeding from his neck. "That's George," he said. I was staying in my aunt's house when I saw my 4-year-old cousin April sitting on the stairs. She was making funny faces. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, "I'm copying the lady with the braid." There was no one else there, so I asked, "Where is this lady, April?" She pointed up at the beam running parallel to the stairwell. "And what is that lady doing?" I asked. "Making funny faces," April replied. I was about to go upstairs when April said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Her braid is around her neck." I asked her what she meant. April pointed up and said, "The lady is hanging by her braid. She's making funny faces at me." Then April started making a face. Her eyes were wide and bugged out, her mouth hung open, and her tongue stuck out. I realized it was the face of someone who was strangling to death. I could only think. I lacked any physical form or sensations. I was simply somewhere. The area wasn't big or small, it was just empty beyond all comprehension. This was hell in every meaning of the word. I had no mouth, but I had no will or reason to want to scream. I just existed. I don't know how long I'd been there. It could have been an eternity or a few seconds. I remember wanting to just feel something, anything. I was completely deprived of all emotional and physical stimulation, and due to this I could barely think straight. I tried to remember something, but I couldn't. I just wanted to feel. Then everything stopped. The alarm had woken me up, as it had for the past year or so. I turned the bedside lamp on and began to feel the lack of a companion beside me, and suddenly remembered that she had left me for someone else. The emptiness I felt in the dream came back, so I just ripped the alarm clock out of the wall and took a large drink from the Scotch bottle on my nightstand. After sitting there for a few moments, I laid back down, bearing in mind that I could not escape my own mind, no matter my state of consciousness. I went back to sleep, not sure whether to hope for death or ignorance. I don't think there's much of a difference in my case. My niece had an imaginary friend, but she said she wasn't allowed to tell anyone his name. She said he told her everyone would get scared if they knew it. We kept asking her, but she said she would never tell anyone the name. Then, one day, her mom and I were in the hallway and my niece didn't realize it. She was talking to her imaginary friend and called him by his name. To this day, whenever I think about it, I'm still creeped out. The imaginary friend's name was Lucifer. His daughter came home with a weird doll that day. She seemed pretty excited about it. He was happy that she was happy, but there was something odd about that doll. Whenever he saw the doll, whether it was lying in the living room or his daughter's room, it always looked as though it was staring at him. Its eyes were so real. He could not shake the feeling that they were following him, those big brown eyes. He found the doll laying on the coffee table one day and found that its eyes were bloodshot. That could not have been possible. It was a doll. It was not alive. It's just a doll. That very moment, his daughter flounced in and grabbed the doll. "Look, Daddy," she said, "I drew on her eyes," and skipped away giggling. One day, the father heard loud thumping noises from her daughter's room. He ran to her room and found her playing with a doll, with a newly formed scratch on her cheek. He asked how she got it. "Oh, it just happened while I was playing with Dolly." He left the room perturbed. He was perturbed because he had noticed how weird he felt when the doll was around. He had noticed how strangely attached to the doll his daughter was, and how strange those eyes were on that doll. What he did not notice, however, was a small, squeaky, broken voice whimpering the words, "Don't go, please." "Shh, little Dolly," said the little girl. "We don't want Daddy to ruin our play." I awake with a jolt. Gasping for air, I inhale deeply. Dank, moldy air fills my lungs. I'm completely enveloped in a pitch-black darkness. Lying there, I try to move my arms. It's been a long time since I moved my arms. Slowly, I lift them from my sides, only to hit something just a few inches above them. Making a fist, I rotate my hands and knock on the object in front of me. Wood. And it sounds solid. The air is thick and putrid. I sputter and wheeze, trying to expel years of dust. My whole body moves and my knees hit a bit too hard on the wood above me. Trapped, like a nut inside a shell. Methodically, I maneuver my arm to reach the metal brooch pinned on my jacket. Removing it, I work it to an angle that I'm able to apply an upward force. I scrape and chisel into the wood. Hours go by. The stagnant air ripe with sweat and tainted body odor. I can feel wood shavings on my wrist and arm. Several hours later, I'm still scraping and clawing, my wrist and forearm burning from overexhaustion. The oxygen in this wooden box is dangerously low. The heat and rancid air burns my lungs. Perspiration pouring from my body, mixing with the mold, making a kind of sweat soup. My mind reeling with utter determination to escape this wooden prison. The wood above my hand starts to buckle and I can feel dirt and debris pelting my hand. Mustering every last ounce of strength, I force both my hands up and the wood gives way. Dirt and rocks flood in, and adrenaline kicks into high gear. Clawing and climbing, I make my way forward through the loose soil. My hand suddenly pops through. Freedom. Pushing myself out of the dirt and into the daylight, I survey the area. I can hear scratching and digging around me. I can see other holes where others had already made their way out. I shamble over to the water fountain in the middle of the graveyard. Thirsty, after having dug myself out, I'm about to drink from the fountain when I spot my reflection in the water. Still missing the top of my head and jaw where I used the shotgun. One evening, I was driving along a lonely mountain road. The light was fading fast and it was beginning to rain. I had been driving for hours and my eyes were tired. I was having trouble staying awake. As I negotiated a sharp bend, I noticed a man hitchhiking by the side of the road. Taking pity on him, I pulled over and picked him up. As he got into the car, he thanked me for stopping. "My car broke down," he said. "I thought I was going to be stuck out there all night." We drove off down the mountain road. It started to get darker and the rain grew heavier. "You're not from around here," said the man. "No," I replied, "I'm not." "You know, this area is a black spot," said the man. "It's a dangerous road. Over the years, there have been many fatal accidents." "Really?" I asked, surprised. "It doesn't look dangerous." "Looks can be deceiving," he replied. "Countless victims have lost their lives here. Not all of them were killed in a car crash. The locals say this stretch of road is haunted." Just then, I saw something up ahead. There was a young woman standing in the middle of the road. In the glare of the headlights, I could see that she was very beautiful. She was wet from the rain, and the flimsy white dress she was wearing was see-through. She looked almost naked. As I slowed down to take a closer look, the man in the passenger seat suddenly became upset. "No, it's a trick," he said. "That woman is a decoy. Look in the rear-view mirror." I glanced behind me just in time to see an old woman about to open the rear passenger door. Her face was rotting and covered with withering maggots. We both screamed as I floored the accelerator and the car lurched forward. We tore out of there like a bat out of hell and never looked back. When we reached the next town, I dropped the man off at a gas station and thanked him for saving my life. I don't think I'll ever drive down that lonely mountain road again. My girlfriend is a homicide detective, and a couple years ago she was investigating the murder of a little boy. They still hadn't found the body. The mother of the little boy broke down and admitted that she had killed him and hid his body under their old trailer. When the police went out to search the trailer, they found that there was a new family living in it. The family said that their son had an imaginary friend who lived under the trailer and would come up to see him. The police found the body of the dead boy just under his room. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.